Greetings. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm Salvador Cordova, and greetings especially to my Christian brethren who are celebrating this Good Friday and Easter weekend. As I mentioned, it is Good Friday, and I'm going to be sharing some Good Friday thoughts. And I'm going to read from the Gospels first and then have just a little bit of commentary. I really very much enjoy just reading straight from the Gospels and God's Word because I feel that I can't say anything better than the way God wrote it. The most I can hope for is to hope that I can help people understand what the sense of the words are. But with that, let me read the Good Friday account from the Gospel of Luke, and I'm going to I'm just going to read straight from the Luke chapter 23, and a little bit from Luke chapter 24. Let me at least say hi to everyone here. So, greetings, Jerry Martin, and greetings, Ramen. So this is the Good Friday account from the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel according to Luke. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean, and when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. Pilate then called together the chief priests and rulers, the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people, and after examining him before you, behold, I find nothing. I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him." They all cried out together, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas," a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. And as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And they cast lots to divide his garments, and the people stood by watching. But the rulers scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, "Certainly this man was innocent." And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home, beating their breasts. And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. Now there was a man named Joseph from the Jewish town of Arimathea. He was a member of the council, a good and righteous man who had not consented to their decision and action, and he was looking for the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud and laid him in a tomb cut in stone, where no one had ever yet been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath day they rested according to the commandment. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified on the third day. Be crucified and on the third day rise." And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stopping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves, and he went home marveling at what happened. And on these claims of Christ's death on a cross and his resurrection rests the Christian faith. This summarizes the foundation of the Christian faith. Here at Evidence and Reasons, I've tried to give evidence and reasons why this account should be believable. It says in one of the epistles of Peter, chapter 1, verse 8, though you do not see him, you love him. How could it be that these people in the first century especially would believe in a Messiah that they haven't seen? They weren't eyewitnesses to seeing the crucifixion, nor the resurrection. Well, the accounts in Acts give a clue that the apostles were mighty acts. That's why the book is called the Acts of the Apostles. And these people had seen miracles, and they had seen these apostles testify. It became believable. God granted signs and wonders to confirm the Christian testimony. And then later on, the Christians, many of them, perhaps Peter himself was martyred in Rome. And then probably, I'm just reasonably speculating here, that the people who had been touched by God, who'd witnessed the miracles of the apostles, who testified of the Lord and Savior, believed and were willing to be martyred. They were willing to be martyred because they accepted the testimony. And it's worth another show to go into why Christianity overtook the Roman Empire. That overtake began long before Constantine made it Christianity the official religion of Rome. But I'd like to say that God works in people's lives, rarely in the United States through powerful miracles, but I think they're credible accounts of it. And the fact that the Christian faith continues to persist is also evidence that, to me, that the Christian God still works miracles. And I'll have a little bit more commentary on that. Let me look at my notes here. But consider this. I'm going to share a poem. Think about the influence of Christianity on history. The great world religion, one of them, is Christianity. Even though there's nominal commitment to it, the name Jesus Christ is recognized among Christians. Among Muslims, he is revered as a prophet. This is a very large fraction of the world's population that is at least acquainted with some notion of Jesus Christ. How unlikely was this to have happened? Let me give you an idea here. Dr. James Allen had some observations to this effect. Can you tell me if this doesn't sound like a miracle that Jesus Christ would have had such an influence on human history? One solitary life. Let me put that back up. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never went to college. He never visited a big city. He never traveled more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did none of the things usually associated with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33. His friends ran away. His friends ran away. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. While dying, his executioners gambled for his clothing, the only property he had on earth. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 centuries have come and gone, and today Jesus is the central figure of the human race and the leader of mankind's progress. All the armies that have ever marched, navies that have ever sailed, all the parliaments that have ever sat, all the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected the life of mankind on earth as powerfully as that one solitary life. I should like to point out one reason I feel that history is not well taught in there's a de-emphasis in teaching it correctly or accurately or in a balanced way, is that people would actually see the influence of Christianity on humanity. For example, I did a reading of some things that were going on in Red China under the leadership of Mao, who was advocating atheism. You would think from listening to atheists that somehow a utopia would be ushered in once religion was exterminated. Quite the opposite happened in Red China. Christianity was not by any means a big religion in China, but they tried to snuff out what little there was of it and to force communism down people's throats and make the state the priority. But see, communism has a lot of values that are anti-Christian, that puts the state first before God, that no one's accountable to anything except the state, and the state is actually the people who are in control. It's not really even all the people. We know that because in communist countries, they just exterminate people. And when you see the ludicrous, irrational behavior, I gave a brief account, and it'd be worth going over again at some point, where Chairman Mao had given 40 mangoes as a gift, made a big deal about it. And some dentist said, that's just mangoes. He got shot in the head because that was considered kind of like a blasphemy against their communist leader. And where's the rationality there? Where are the ethics? This is what happens when humans are just try to decide that they're the final arbiter of what's right and wrong. The people in power will just do what they feel is right for themselves many times. And that we've seen that play out. That is in contrast to nations that have had a Christian conscience. Even countries and factions that have been in war, like say the Civil War in the United States, there was still enough of a Christian conscience that the opposing sides, after the war had ceased, were able to cooperate and work together. There was still a Christian conscience there. I'd like why don't they accurately portray what happened between North and South Korea? Christian South Korea, you look at it and compare it to what happened in North Korea under a totalitarian regime that snuffs out Christianity. You'll begin to see the value. You'll begin to see the value of Christianity there. And so that solitary life has, I would just invite people to consider, how did that happen? How could this poor carpenter with no education or political power become such a central figure unless God were behind it? And happy Easter to you. Happy Easter to you, Dapper Dino. By the way, I hope Dapper Dino will take up my invitation. We had decided sometime to talk about Richard Carrier and his mythicism. Now, Dapper Dino doesn't, I think I could share this. He doesn't think very highly of Richard Carrier's scholarship. And I'd like to have Dapper Dino sometime just share his thoughts. I will, Dapper's very private about his personal beliefs, and I intend to respect that. But I very much value what he has to say about Richard Carrier, especially since Dapper Dino is someone who's deeply interested in history. So now let me share this account of Jeff Henderson. Now that story of the the thief has meaning for a lot of people. And I want to point out the sort of people that God calls to himself. Let me just read this. And you can tell me if you also think this accords with the thief on the cross. First Corinthians 1, chapter 1, 26 through 29. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. To me, that is one of the most precious verses in the Bible. And that passage of the thief on the cross means a lot to me. There are lots of us that are weighed down with decisions we made in life that we really regret. I made decisions that were very well-intentioned. Not that they were particularly scandalous, but it's like, man, if I could have just done this different, if I just worked a little harder here instead of doing that. I mean, really no big deal. It still weighs down on my heart, especially as I get older. It's like, man, I'm running out of time. I wish I had time to just set this straight. But then I look at that thief on the cross. Can you imagine? Really, you live your life, you're stealing, you're hurting people, and there you are, just stuck on a cross, dying. And there's Jesus. Now, there's some subtleties that I even just recognize in that passage in Luke. People were mocking Jesus and saying, he saved others. Why doesn't he save himself? So it seems to be common knowledge at that point that Jesus worked miracles. So I'm presuming here that all the people there knew something of the Lord's reputation for working miracles. And they were like, that's why they're saying he was being mocked. Why don't you save us and yourself? Or why don't you save yourself? He's being mocked. And so it seems apparent to me that that was common knowledge, even among the thieves on the cross. And somewhere along the way, I presume, or it's rather obvious, one of the thieves came to his senses and recognized who the Lord was. Somehow, maybe he didn't totally figure out why Jesus was on the cross, but he knew he was the Messiah. And what more beautiful words when you've totally messed up your life. Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise. He's saying it's going to be all right. I'm going to fix this. Jesus is saying, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix this for you. And that's one reason the Christian faith has resonated among the low and the despised, the people in the world that don't have a lot going for them. They have really very little to lose and everything to gain by turning to the Lord. So to that end, let me point out something in contrast. What hope do we have in atheism? And I found this really interesting. I found this on Logical Plausible Probables channel. And by the way, we'll be ending the stream so that you all can jump over there and join his stream. I'd like to thank everyone, by the way, that has joined the stream. There was a very interesting comment that was made on that live stream. someone who runs the channel known as Answers in Atheism was showing up and just kind of mocking John and the crew here. And Randolf Richardson, who debated John Maddox, and Randolf Richardson is an atheist, I'll point you to something he said. Atheism doesn't provide answers to anything. There, I'll highlight it right there. And so you have the reference. Atheism doesn't provide answers to anything. And this is something that I noticed when I nearly left the Christian faith. I said, I appreciated the skepticism of the atheist community. Being a scientist and engineer, that's a virtue. You are skeptical about yourselves. You know that you're fallible. You can make mistakes. You welcome people correcting you. I don't welcome people just being skeptical for the sake of being skeptical. I welcome people providing data that would help me make the right decisions and to assess things correctly. That's what I welcomed. And so it's kind of funny sometimes in the church. It felt really funny that when I ask questions, I'd be denigrated for it. Just like, why? Shouldn't you be eager that someone's asking questions and wanting to get reassured of their faith? And I didn't get that, and I nearly left. Because my that culture was just so bad and so negative in the church, and it totally doesn't surprise me we're losing the next generation of Christians, because I found the business model of a lot of churches is to avoid tough questions. They would rather just have social clubs and entertainment. I remember when I was going through a lot of doubt, some people said, well, why don't I take you to the Amy Grant concert? And I was thinking, how's that going to solve anything for my life? How's that going to give me answers? But I found out that, God bless these people. They were well-meaning, but that was their model of how to fix doubts and how to answer tough questions and how to provide evidence and how to provide inspiration. It really didn't work for me. These are very sweet people, and they're still my friends to this day. But this is, I find it funny that there's this YouTube channel, Answers in Atheism, and people go spend 2 hours a day just trying to go there, and yet another atheist is saying there's no answers there. So why waste your time? Why waste your time? But let me move on to my real point. Christ has answers. Christ has answers. And I'm going to read this. This is like one of my favorite accounts. Let me see if I could find it here. Let me take this down. I found it. This is from BeliefNet. This is an incredible story. I'm just going to read it. See what the Lord has done in people's lives. And the title of this article is A Dish of Inspiration from Chef Jeff. How did I find this? My mother loves watching the Food Network. And, since I try to keep her company, I try to watch TV with her, even though I'm bored to death. But I was very fascinated by this guy named Jeff Henderson. And I said, I got to find out if he's a Christian. They didn't mention it in his biography on this Food Network. It's a very, it's a very commercial enterprise, and they probably didn't want to offend the non-believers watching. But I said, you know what? I have a feeling this guy's a believer. I got to find out more. And I kept digging and digging, and here it was. Here's a story. A dish of inspiration from Chef Jeff. Food Network's Chef Jeff Henderson talks to BeliefNet about how food helped him find his life's purpose. Chef Jeff Henderson has a big story to tell. Convicted of selling drugs in San Diego at age 25, he was jailed for 10 years, during which time he came into what would be a life-transforming passion, cooking. From the prison kitchen to a groundbreaking position as the first African-American executive chef at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. Oh, yes, I love the Bellagio. Chef Jeff worked his way through the American culinary world, but he never forgot what it was like to be a directionless teenager caught in the dangerous world of drugs, gangs, and poverty. In 2007, he authored the best-selling memoir, Cooked, And this year he published a cookbook, Chef Jeff Cooks, and launched an inspiring show on Food Network, the Chef Jeff Project. Henderson spoke to BeliefNet about what it means to be a real man, why he was once so angry with Jesus, and what is the perfect bite of food. So I presume the questions by the interviewer are in bold. Is there something inherently meaningful in the process of preparing and serving food? Or does that just happen to be where your personal passion lies? I truly feel that food is a celebration of life. It's the most important, most valuable gift that God gave humans. Without food, no one could survive. With food, you're able to think. You're able to be creative. You're able to provide for yourself and your family. For me, and for a lot of men and women who've been incarcerated, food has been a vehicle to a successful transition from prison to society, because you're able to work in an industry that's open to former incarcerated individuals, and you get to eat while you're there. Talk about the moment when food changed your life. It wasn't that I just started working kitchen that day and my life was changed. It began with education, because through education, I was able to come into the thought process of accepting responsibility for the things I'd done wrong. And I had to begin to view the world different and think different in order to allow anything positive to come into my life to impact change. After the first seed was planted, I worked in the kitchen. And over a period of time, I began to be praised for the foods that I prepared, the flavors, the pride, that I put into cooking. You never had culinary school education, but you provide a culinary education for the crew members of the Chef Jeff Project if they complete the program. Yes, they all win a 2-year scholarship at the Art Institute. How do you compare the value of official school education as opposed to what you can learn on jobs from mentors from books? Well, what I missed is the culinary terminology, better understanding of the science of cooking, the historical aspects of food, proper cooking technique, and things like that. I got on the job training, but there were still lots of pieces that I missed. So I had to pick up on those by reading culinary curriculum and culinary books that were mandatory usage in the top culinary schools. It's one of the reasons why I want to give the young people scholarships to schools versus money or gadgets and trinkets, because one day when they find a point in their life, they want to give back or reach back and give the same opportunity to someone that I gave them. They have the credentials to be able to teach in a culinary school. I don't have the credentials to teach in a culinary school because I don't have a diploma in culinary arts. In Cooked, you talked about how during your trial, you sang a hymn to comfort yourself. Jesus, I know you're going to make a way for me. You write later, though, that while you were in jail, you became angry with Jesus. What is your faith life like today? At the time when I talked about Jesus, I know you're going to make a way for me, my life was in the hands of a juror. And when I was found guilty and sent to prison, I became bitter and had this disbelief in God. Over a period of time, I come to the realization that this is part of God's plan to get me at the point I'm in my life today, and it became a blessing in disguise. But it took trial and error and growth and development personally to be able to understand why I was put in that situation, because even when I was on the streets, I was a nonviolent person. I cared about people. I had a heart. I had a certain level of consciousness. And I had to go to prison to find myself, to be able to teach and do things that I do today. I am a believer in God, and I am a Christian, and it's by the grace of God that I've made it this far, to live to be 44 years old. I truly believe that my success is directly tied to God's work, which is rescuing, motivating, inspiring, and uplifting people of all races and from all different communities. Do you think religious faith is important for at-risk youth, or is having passion enough? Yeah, I think having a connection to a sort of spirituality that works for you makes you a better person. Young people today have a disregard for religion and spiritual faith because they're disgruntled with the churches, the preachers, and the lifestyles of some of these mega churches. Oh my, ow. Sorry, that's, sorry about that. I just had to interject some commentary. Let me go on. I believe that in order to bring a young person who comes from adverse backgrounds, who has no confidence and hope in themselves or this country, that you have to work on changing their thought process first. How do you define manhood? In my former life, I defined manhood by having the most cars, the most beautiful women, money, which brought status and credibility in my circle and in the world that I was living in. Today, I define a man as a person, a man of purpose, a man of structure, a man of conviction, someone who values his family, his children, his community, and is not valued by what he has materialistically. Having missed out on having loving male figures in your life as a young man, how do you show love to your wife and children, to young people that you mentor? I try to give them what I never got. I've seen and been around examples of love and fatherhood. When I speak to young men, especially, and my sons, I hug them, I encourage them, I reinforce them. You know, I let them know that I believe in them and I see potential. I know the smile that it brings to a young man's face when I tell them I love him and I care about him and I see potential in him. And I truly believe the foundation of change and success, whether it's fatherhood, personal, or professional success, is that you have to find your purpose before you can have a dream. And you know, once you do that, then things begin to manifest in your life. What do you think is the most basic thing that a kid who's heading toward trouble needs to hear to make them change course? Tough love talk. Tough love talk about the consequences of making bad choices, because a lot of young people make wrong choices as far as gangs, drugs, and crime, but they don't know the consequence. They don't know the outcome. They don't know the impact it has on community, on victims. Now, this is obviously a long article. I'm not going to read through all of it. I provided the link in the video description. Yes, Dapper, this guy sounds like a totally by accident. I just happened to be watching the Food Network, and people who know me know that I watch things other than cooking. I like history stuff. I watch sports. I watch news. I like financial markets. That's where my interest. So it was rather laborious, and I ran into this great dude. It was worth it. So now I do want to add one thing about that story of the thief on the cross. I mean, that has to be one of my favorite stories. The thief on the cross. As in the book of Romans, all things work for the good of those who love God. And, I could think about that thief of the cross. He doesn't have a lot of life left. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life when you're so messed up? You love God. It'll work all for the good. And I think maybe in some sort of way that I can't totally figure out, it's retroactive. I mean, if you think about it, can you think about how it, I mean, if we wrote his story, it's like, this is how I met Jesus. I totally messed up. I ended up getting jailed. I ended up getting sentenced. I ended up on a cross. That's how I found Jesus. See, that all the mistakes that you made can be made to be worked out for the good. What a great honor to be beside Jesus as he's dying for your sins. That's a ringside seat. Jesus dying on the cross, you're right there while he's redeeming you. That's so what I say is, this story of Jeff Henderson's wonderful. He's able to redeem the rest of his life. But there are a lot of people that's like, yeah, I don't have many hours left. God can heal that. Now, maybe as a side note, I don't know that this has relevance to anything. I was at a wedding in October 2001 after the 9/11 attacks, and there was a gentleman there, and they're telling the story that, one morning, the night before, he got totally trashed. One night he got really trashed, couldn't make it to work the next day. And he couldn't make it to work the next day because his hangover was so bad. Well, it just happened to be that he worked at the World Trade Center, and that day that he had to call in and say he can't make it to work happened to be September 11th, 2001. So it does seem that you can totally screw up and God can redeem it. And that's the story I get from the thief on the cross. It's comforting to know that maybe the one thing you can do is love God, and he will work all things for the good. For many of us that have lots of regrets about life and shattered dreams, God can redeem that. And that's why that story there is so beautiful to me. I think about that. And how this ties into the other stuff that we have here. And I don't mean to be, I see that Dr. Dan is here, but I have to point out that if the creation story is true, then the redemption story of Jesus Christ is true too. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't people that believe in Christianity that also accept old earth or evolution. I did too. But as far as I'm concerned, to the extent we have scientific evidence that the world is created and that it's young and affirms the genealogy of Jesus Christ, we have reason to hope. I'd rather take the risk of being wrong there because there's really nothing to lose, everything to gain on that hypothesis. And but for me, when I nearly left the Christian faith 20 years ago, 21 years ago, boy, that was a long time. And I was just, I was getting frustrated by just asking people in church, why do you believe in God? And just, either getting non-answers or just being ridiculed for even asking it. I was at the end of my rope. But what did it for me was essentially what Randolph Richardson said in that stream. Other atheists have said it in so many words. Atheism doesn't provide answers to anything. And by the way, he's suddenly become one of my favorite atheists. I said, yeah, I appreciate that. At that point, I said, what little scraps I have of evidence that's just left a spark, because I believe I've seen miracles both in my life and answered prayer, and I've seen miracles in other people's lives. And those of you who have watched the James Tour series, he shares his conversion where he had a visitation from Jesus when he was praying to receive him. He said someone was in his room and you knew it was the Lord. He didn't want God to leave him ever. And I said, yeah, I can't run away from that in my life or other people's lives. And so that's why I came back to Christianity, and I have pursued evidence and reasons for the Christian faith ever since. So with that, I really thank you all for joining me in this stream. There's another stream coming up in about an hour on Logical Plausible Probables channel to celebrate his 1,300 subscribers. And I'd like to wish you all a Good Friday and happy Easter. Thank you all who have visited today. Have a blessed Good Friday and happy Easter.